Hello, wonderful moms. So I am excited to sit down with Cynthia from Inside Our Normal and just chat through what it means to have out of the box learners. So, Cynthia is a homeschool mom of three out of the box kids, and she writes at insideournormal.com. And this gives practical support to help families embrace each child's unique learning style. So, in this interview, Cynthia has given so much practical advice from getting getting a diagnosis, picking curriculum, and planning for future education and career paths. So, just some things that you should keep in mind as far as helping your child's future. So, I do think that when it comes to outside of the box learners, that this is one area of the homeschool community that could and should be strengthened. So whether you have out of the box learners or not, you will learn so much from this interview. So let's get into the show. Cynthia, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here. So I write at Inside Our Normal and write about life and homeschool with outside the box kids because in our house, we're all a little bit outside the box. And that actually 3 out of the 5 of us have autism, as well as ADHD, different learning disabilities, giftedness, anxiety. We got all of it, all over our family. So we can't really tell what's what. So we just call it all outside the box learning.
So how many kids do you have?
So I have 3. At the time when we're recording this, they are 13, 11, and 9.
Okay. So it's a nice little bunch there.
Yes, it is nice. It was a little hectic when they were little.
Yes.
But now, it's pretty wonderful because they're all kind of in the same season of life and independence that we can really do some really fun things as a family now.
Yeah. So my 3 oldest are 2 years apart too. And so, yeah, the early on, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to survive the toddler years.
Yes.
So now they're all like teenagers, but then our younger 3 are a little more spread out. So yeah. Mm-hmm. So how long have you been homeschooling your kids?
So we've been homeschooling, I like to say right now, about 10 years.
Okay.
I dabbled with interest-led preschool with my oldest. And we did a couple little dip our feet into public school, a little for certain kids at certain times. But at this point, everybody plans to be homeschooled through high school. And that's the right fit for each of them for different reasons.
Okay. So you described your family as out of the box learners. So can we take a deeper dive into that? Because it sounds like your homeschool is going to be very unique and individual driven.
Yes.
So let's just, how do you do all that?
Okay, while it's individualized and driven, we also learn a lot as a family. So we follow kind of a couch time, literature-based, Charlotte Mason, unit study are all kind of worlds and terms that we kind of use and what I look for when I'm looking for materials. But when we're learning together, because it's a 4-year age span and because of different challenges that the kids have, that looks a lot like either hands-on learning projects that we're doing together, or it's read alouds and discussion. So we do a lot of our history and science via read alouds. And actually, I don't like to read aloud, so we do audiobooks.
I finally met another mom who does not like to read aloud.
So when we were trying to find our history last year, I was looking at different options, but my first question was, is this on audiobook? Because I'm not going to read this whole book to the kids.
It's like the homeschool mom black mark against you if you don't like to read aloud. It really is. And I'm like, I've never liked it. Even when I babysat kids, I hated reading aloud. So thank you. There's somebody else like me.
But I married My husband could be a professional audiobook narrator. Like, he is amazing at reading aloud. And my other secret is I give the literature read alouds, like the chapter books, historical fiction, like literature kinds of stuff, to him. And so he reads those at bedtime. So our bedtime stories, which we're still reading bedtime stories with 9, 11, and 13-year-olds, those are our school books. Those are part of our school. Now, with 365 nights of reading aloud, he also picks some of his own and stuff along the way. But it does, he needs some help coming up with titles, because that's a lot of nights to read aloud. And our read aloud time has gotten longer the older the kids get, because they want to read more. Our stories are bigger. We just have bigger attention spans. So he reads with like all the voices and everything at bedtime, but not me. In fact, my mother has commented that when she's been with us at various times and stayed together somewhere, she enjoys listening to him read aloud. So, but not me.
But that is a good way to kind of break up the homeschool day and to actually make it more engaging too.
Yeah. Well, and it lets him really be a part of sharing in those stories that then become part of our family culture, and he's not absent from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, because you said you have giftedness, you have ADHD, you have autism. Now, have you gotten all of these officially diagnosed?
So we have.
Okay.
We have. And actually, to go back to what our learning looks like. So we learn those subjects together, but then they're independent skill subjects, which are their language arts and their math, and some electives and other things. Those are highly independent, highly individualized as far as what each kid needs. And we throw out the grade levels, because each kid is multiple grade levels depending on the subject for said needs. We did pursue testing for all 3 kids at various times for various reasons. I'm a big proponent of getting the testing and getting the official labels, because knowledge is power. And when you know what it is, and when you tell your child what it is, it empowers them to say, I'm not broken, that I have this challenge, but I can get past it, or these are the tools I need to overcome it. And so we're very open at our house as far as what everybody's challenges are. In fact, when we recorded this, I had done research for my middle child, who was my most outside the box and kind of started us down that journey. Through his investigating for him, I saw a lot of things for myself. And actually, the same day we're recording this, I actually received my own official autism diagnosis today that I sought out, because while in the adult autism community, it is valid to have a self-diagnosis, because it can be hard when you need a low level of support and are functioning seemingly well in society. But I wanted to have that official confirmation so that I could really embrace it and begin to more accept it and study it for myself. Because it's powerful to really know, instead of just saying I'm broken, or why do I have these quirks? So.
Right. Okay. Because I know, like, especially with a lot of homeschoolers, there's some conflict when it comes to the labels.
There is. So, and it doesn't always matter. Resources and stuff wouldn't change. We pursued some testing for my oldest and my youngest, because I saw specific learning challenges and roadblocks that they weren't in line with the other kids. My oldest has dyscalculia, which is a learning disability in math. And we pursued that after we reverted back to starting over learning the multiplication tables for the 3rd time, using the 3rd curriculum in 3 years. And I was like, okay, this isn't that you're a bad student. This isn't that I'm a bad teacher. Something else is at play here. And so we wanted to uncover what that was.
No, that's a really, I think, good perspective, because again, in the homeschool community, it's so many people are afraid of the labels, but I'm like you. I'm like, no, knowledge is power.
It is.
You don't have to like wear it like a badge or tattoo it on your forehead, but at least if you know, like with the dyscalculia, okay, there's a disconnect basically that you need to figure out how to work around.
Right. And we've found for that child, the math curriculum that's really working for her. And I've tried to offer her some other curriculums as they've come across my radar, and she won't go to any other curriculum because that one is making it click. And that one she has seen progress with. And we've even worked with some of their staff members to really make sure things are working. And that's what she wants to use. I said, that's fine. We can just keep going down that path. And she's owning it. She's looking for the accommodations. We are actually pursuing an IEP with our local school district. So she'll have it in place for standardized testing come potentially being on a college track. So that she has that in place and it's not a hindrance later.
Okay. So that's actually, I never thought about that, or that and never crossed my mind. So what, I guess, so what are some of the positive aspects, like getting the IEP for college later, would you suggest for moms to do? So not to be afraid of the labels, but what are some of those things that you have found that will really help them for future education?
So one thing is, in our area, in my state, with my local district, with having official diagnosis, we can pursue an IEP with the district, and we actually can get supply funding from our local district right now. So for a lot of families, that can be helpful. And then another thing is, if your child's headed on a college bound track, and so they're looking at the ACTs, SATs, while accommodations are a totally natural part of our homeschool, which is an amazing benefit of homeschooling. They're not going to be able to walk into a college classroom or to walk into the ACT and necessarily have those same accommodations. And so by getting the documentation now, they're not as likely to question the need for those accommodations at that later time, because you do have to, my understanding is you do have to apply to have accommodations on those college entrance exams. And they don't want to see that suddenly you have an IEP when you're 16. Like, why didn't you need help before? So starting the process now when she's 13, which in a good school is still probably going to take us a full semester, if not a year, to get, because of the timeline and the testing that is legally mandated. It's just a long, drawn out process. We are going to be starting the process this next year. And part of it too, she is on board with pursuing it. When I first addressed it with her, it was something she wasn't interested in. And when you're doing it in the preteen years, you want to have the buy-in from the kids and to know that you're helping. And the way we've talked about it is we're helping to equip her so that she can advocate well for herself in the future, and to have the tools that she needs to be successful, to have access to those resources that will help her in the future.
No, that's really good advice. I like practical, how to kind of advice. And so that's really good. So let me ask you this, since you have had the official diagnosis, and kind of gone through, I guess, that emotional, and I don't know what that was like for you, but that emotional kind of response.
It's an emotional roller coaster. Oh, yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what advice would you give a mom who either suspects something and has been afraid to get the diagnosis, or just received a diagnosis? Let's help the moms here.
So nothing has changed about your child between yesterday and today. In fact, I told myself that this morning after I received this, is that nothing's different. Your kid is exactly the same kid they were yesterday. The same amazing, all the strengths that are there. You now have the power to really access the right resources because you have that label or you have that diagnosis. For many, the diagnosis opens doors to be medically necessary to apply for specific therapies or educational interventions, whether it's through your insurance or your school district. You need to have that diagnosis. You can't just say, hey, my kid's struggling. They don't know what to do with that. But to
Right.
have the testing that says, this is where my child's struggling, it opens the door for those resources. But nothing has changed about all the amazing things about your child. They're not broken. They're not, they're still the same amazing kid. And those same things they love are going to be their strengths in the future. So for my, I'll tell you one. So my youngest is dyslexic. And since the time he could sit up, he was building towers, and they never, ever fell down. I have a photograph of him standing up. He was my earliest walker. He was building a tower with those cardboard bricks at the science center. And he got mad because he couldn't build it any taller, because he was reaching above his head to add blocks to the tower. And he's 11 months old. Okay. Nobody's helping him build this tower. And I have a picture of this because, all these things, and he's always built towers. They never fell down till he had a cousin younger than him knock them over. And then he got really mad. And this was like 2 years ago at 7. Come to find out, after we get his dyslexia diagnosis, that engineering mind is very common in dyslexics.
Ah, interesting.
So, and we got it because we went after dyslexia because he wasn't learning as quickly as his siblings. And I was seeing some holes in those readiness signs. So I pursued it very early because we'd already had some other diagnosis for his brothers.
Right.
So I went looking for it, but then, and he is now reading very much at grade level or above, which is typical, but he still reverses letters. Okay. And then he has these strengths of this engineering mind and everything, which is also dyslexia. But it's just not, it's not just the learning to read. These personalities have, autism, they have fixations, but that means that they're experts in something.
Right.
So, that's a strength in the career world, right? So they're not, you just got to flip how you think about things.
Yeah. So then how do you, I guess, pick and find and then pick curriculum? Is it a lot of trial and error, or what's some curriculum that has just been like amazing?
So we started out with the nice all-in-one box because I had a 6-year-old going into 1st grade. And then we got it, and I was like, well, actually, she's not reading at this level. She's reading higher. So we have to swap that out and go find something else. And then, this math isn't really engaging her. So we have to go swap that out. And so that was kind of how we started. The longer I've homeschooled, the more confident I've gotten in my own abilities. And I've also been able to pick apart the strategy that some curriculum companies use to build their curriculum.
Okay.
So I can go get other resources and follow a similar strategy as to how we assign it. So currently I kind of look at the major subject areas, science, history, reading, writing, math, and kind of figure out, what do we need to learn next?
Okay.
What does each kid need to learn next? And then the subjects that we tend to do as a family, what have we not talked about for a while? Or seasonally, what do we need to know? This last year, we were planning to go west as a family, camped for 15 days at about 6 national parks. And so we made it a priority to study rocks and geology because we were going to the Grand Canyon and arches and the petrified forest. And I wanted them to have context for that. And the beauty of homeschooling is we can learn about whatever we want, whenever we want. So why not fit it in? So it's this epic unit study, hands-on learning kind of thing. So I kind of do that, and we'll pick kind of unit studies based on the kids' influences, and then pull resources for that. So it's a little bit eclectic. But, I'm not afraid of having co-op classes and stuff fit in either, as long as it's the right fit for that kid at that time.
Yeah, I think after 10 years of homeschooling, like, you kind of become an expert in curriculum. You really do. So were you homeschooled at all, or?
So I was not, but I had a very by today's standards, very unusual public school experience. And I am married to a homeschooled through K-12. So
Okay.
when I bring up like, well, this typical, public school experience, then I have to explain it to my husband because no, he doesn't know that that's what every 7-year-old does because he wasn't in school. So yeah,
Okay.
I actually had multi-grade classrooms, independent study, unit studies, interest-led learning was all part of my public school experience.
That is
So
definitely
yeah.
different.
And it was kind of odd at one point when I realized, I was like, to give my kids that experience, I have to homeschool them.
Yeah.
And they thrive. And I didn't feel different or odd because I had such a range of kids that there wasn't such a narrow grade level box.
Right. It's almost like you had that homeschool environment in
Mhm.
public school.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to start Inside Our Normal?
So having such an outside the box family, we don't tend to fit into the box very much of typical families, typical co-ops. And yeah, I mean, I had my 8-year-old who couldn't sit in the 1-hour co-op class, and I would have to walk the halls with not my 8-month-old, but my 8-year-old. And so that made it really hard and
Yeah.
feels really lonely when you're trying what your well-meaning homeschool friends tell you works, but it doesn't work for you. And so really it kind of came out of all of the hardship and learning to say, the only way for this to really be worth it is for it to help everyone else. And to be able to share our story. And so other people were able to realize and learn that they're not alone with their outside the box kids, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed, that's not important to me. And that's why I don't use those labels and those medical
Right.
terms on my site because, they're all over the place and it can look really different, but it really came from wanting to provide a place of community and inspiration and, encouragement to other families that want the homeschool experience, want the individualized education, but don't fit in anywhere.
But still don't fit into the homeschool
Right.
groups either.
Yes.
Okay. So how is your website and what you do with that? Is it full-time for you or is it a hobby or a business? Let me ask you that.
I am working to build it to be more of a business. That has always really been my dream. I've begun offering, and I do have coaching packages to really walk with you through your homeschool year, help you set up and help you tease through all of the curriculum options or figure out how to adapt what you've already bought. I'm not going to tell you to spend more money because we've been there, done that.
Yes.
There's plenty of ways to adapt what you already have and tweak things and just look at things differently. And then check in with you throughout the year as your cheerleader and to be like, hey, what about this? What about that? To really walk with you. I heard recently it takes 3 years to find your groove as a homeschool parent. And, so if it doesn't feel like your first year was a good fit, it's okay. It's probably not a good fit. Try something else, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't homeschool.
No, I totally, even because I was homeschooled. So I was a second generation homeschooler. So I was coming in knowing what, because I was homeschooled from 5th grade through high school graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So even knowing that, I think it still took 3 years to finally find the groove as well. So that sounds, because one thing I've noticed as with this, I guess, generation of homeschoolers with their kids is there are a lot of parents who have kid outside of the box learners who are pulling them out of public school. And it's because they're not getting their needs met in public school. And so I think as a homeschool community, we need someone to come alongside.
and
say,
that's what I want to do.
Yes.
That's really my passion. And what's really hard, anybody who wants to homeschool their outside the box kids and anybody who is homeschooling, we have our kids to a high standard, no matter what their abilities are. We want them to succeed. We want them to do that.
Yes.
If your child is in need of any special education services in the school district, they have to fail to such a low level before they receive services to qualify that it's like shattering to parents who want to be involved. Like, why do I have to wait for them to fail? In fact, when we tried public school for one of them who really needed the most support, he suddenly felt different when he went to public school because he knew he couldn't do what his peers were doing, but he still had to be there, and they didn't want to help him as much as we wanted him because our standard as parents was different than what their standard for intervention was. Which can be really challenging if you're trying to work with a school district on getting support. And where homeschooling's awesome.
Yeah. So no, just to touch on that so people know, like my fourth one needed speech therapy. And so I tried with the school district when he was young and they're like, we're not providing it. And I was shocked. I sat there and I looked at them. I said, you are wrong. And so when I took him to a private speech therapist, the percentage she told me, she goes, they only accept or give services to like the bottom 7%.
Yes.
So you have to fail hard, for lack of a better word, to get any kind of services with the school district.
Well, and the other thing that's really hard is they look through starting at age 3. So they don't even have to be in kindergarten. Once you age out of early intervention services on a child's 3rd birthday, so any services would transition to the school district. And those services are based on a new standard that is educationally necessary. Okay. So that is not holistic support that you would get in a private speech, but it's a very different standard. So the school district really didn't care that my son couldn't hold a pencil because it wasn't educationally necessary till kindergarten, even though it's preschool. And it didn't matter that he didn't have the building blocks. It wasn't educationally necessary yet. So it wasn't a concern or a priority for them. So they look at things differently. Right. And that's where homeschooling says, you know what, I don't care what you think. We're going to prohibit these things before they're an issue in the way that supports their strengths and then helps their weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that's the key is support the strengths and then the weaknesses I find tend to get in line eventually. So as we wrap up here, I have 2 more questions for you. So what is your favorite part of being a mom?
I really love learning with my kids. Okay. Going on our trip out west was just amazing to just learn and explore with them, which that gets better. I loved it when they were preschool and we'd go out on adventure days. I'd just sort of be like, okay, forget it. We're not staying home today. We're going wherever. But it's even better now that they're older because we can do bigger things. We can go on big hikes and different, plan these road trips. They're planning our next road trip. They started that recently.
Nice.
So, so there's a lot more buy-in and more equalness on planning those adventures and doing them. So
that sounds like fun. And where can everyone find you?
So you can find me at insideournormal.com. And there's information about coaching and mentoring and all kinds of things there. And then you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram, also at Inside Our Normal.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. You've given us so much good practical information, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.